So the other day, guys, we talked about this testimony that Jack Smith gave in front of a congressional committee. And Jack Smith said, in no uncertain terms, I had Trump. If I was able to finish my job, I think he for sure would have been found guilty and he would have been going to prison. He basically left no wiggle room. He was like, no. He was going down. He was going down. He had all these people lined up to testify. All of them, by the way, over 30 of them. I think all of them were Republicans. He tried to steal the 2020 election. Jack Smith was going to prove that. Not only that, he's not even allowed to talk about, because the judge put a gag order on it, he's not even allowed to talk about the case that's even more hardcore dead to rights, where he was storing classified and top secret documents in the fucking Mar-a-Lago bathroom and the ballroom. And he was like sharing documents with Australian billionaires talking about our secret nuclear technology. I mean, just insane illegality. Insane. And so Jack Smith had him, right? And, we talked about that. That was a bombshell story. The right literally did not touch that story with a 5-foot pole. They were as far away from it as they could possibly get because they knew they couldn't spin that one. There was no way to do it. Well, guess what? Now we learn this. Look at this from Raw Story. Trump admitted to insiders that Jack Smith had him dead to rights. So understand that every time he goes out there and he tells one of his zombie lies and repeats it 1,000 times, he knows he's lying. He knows. He would never say this publicly, but he's saying it privately. All right, here we go. Of all the legal problems Donald Trump faced, from accusations of sexual assault to business fraud, he most feared the Florida stolen government documents investigation by special counsel Jack Smith that ended up being dropped when he won re-election. That is according to Morning Joe co-host Jonathan Lemire, who reported on the president's terror at being convicted during a discussion on U.S. District Attorney Aileen Cannon's Monday ruling that permanently blocked the Justice Department from releasing Smith's final report. Which, by the way, stop and think about that. A judge handpicked by Trump, who's clearly biased in favor of Trump and has skirted all sorts of rules and regulations with so many of the decisions that she made. She's permanently hiding this report from Jack Smith. Permanently. How is that allowed? The public has a right to see this stuff. They continue. With MS Now legal analyst Lisa Rubin once again saying, quote, all bets would be off if the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals decides to intervene, Lemire pointed out that Trump knew he was fortunate that his appointee covered up for him. Oh, shit. After noting there was considerable second-guessing going on after Smith elected to pursue the case in Florida, which led to Cannon's courtroom, Lemire reported Judge Cannon ended up putting a thumb on the scale significantly for Trump down the line. And you're right, Joe Scarborough. We've talked about on the show. Trump has privately told people, more or less, that Jack Smith was dead to rights on that one. He had him, quote, that was the case, the classified documents case, that he feared the most. And I know there will be second guessing for all time in terms of the sequencing of those cases. The ones in Manhattan went first, got a conviction, but it seemed to many to be the least serious, and we will never know if things had gone quicker, if the order was changed, what would have happened. But you're right, Cannon certainly at every opportunity seems to be deferential to Trump, he added. Holy shit, bro. They're literally saying in this alternate history where Jack Smith's cases went first, maybe we don't have a President Trump. Maybe he's already in prison. And that's why all of us, every liberal and leftist and Democrat in the country, fucking despises Merrick Garland too, right? They dragged their feet. Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, these people dragged their fucking feet going after Trump. And as a direct result of that, he was able to mount a campaign and get his ass back in the White House. Okay? I don't know. I can never forgive that. Because now we're dealing with a much more radicalized version of Trump. I've heard other people make this point, and I kind of think it's true. As crazy as it is to say, because Biden was a good president when it came to economics, when it came to domestic policy. He was genuinely good, right? And he deserved a lot more credit than he got based off all the shit he was doing for unions, all the shit he was doing for job creation, 775,000 jobs created, etc. The Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, the infrastructure bill. You got all this stuff. But other people have made the point, and I think it's a salient point, that actually, given where we are now, maybe we would have been better off if Trump just won in 2020 and then was gone 4 years from then. Because then, oh my God, then he wouldn't have been this radicalized. He still would have done a lot of damage. His first term was fucking horrific too, right? But everybody agrees, every reasonable person agrees. The second term is like putting the first term to shame in terms of how depraved and vile it is. But the point people have made is, hey, if he just won in 2020 and had that he wouldn't have had the time. They wouldn't have had the time to create Project 2025, for example, right? They wouldn't have had the time to cook up these cockamamie ideas of like creating the technate of America and overthrowing, trying to steal Greenland, for example, trying to steal Panama, like really crusading now in an old school imperialist way. Trump was a neocon in the first term. This is straight up colonialism and imperialism now on steroids and human growth hormone that we're witnessing here, okay? I don't think they would have been able to build the 23 concentration camps and beef up ICE spending as much as they did. I really think that if we just got his second term out of the way in 2020, we probably would have been better off because we got the absolute worst, most unhinged version of Trump now. The other thing is, because there was 4 years in between, he had more time to self-select all the people who he knew were meat riders, all the people who he knew would let him get away with anything and would always be yes men for him. Whereas in the first term, there was plenty of dissent within, and we didn't know how good we had it in terms of people fighting back against him from within. But then also, if he won in 2020, I think the second term would have also had plenty of people inside the regime that were still pushing back to one extent or another. Now we got none of that. We got like the dumbest and worst people in the country, the biggest fascists and warmongers in the country. And so maybe we are worse off. But really, all of this could have been avoided. All of this. If Jack Smith was able to finish his fucking job, if Merrick Garland moved faster, if the Democrats took this threat seriously, but they really thought like after Trump lost in 2020, they felt like, oh, that's it. We're done with this. And it's like, sorry, you're actually not. So, Jesus Christ, man. I shudder at the thought of what could have been. Don't even get me. On the alternate timeline conversations, you can absolutely drive yourself mad with these alternate timeline conversations. Here's one for you. If the actual winner of the 2000 election was able to become president, Al Gore, he won the popular vote, but also according to 4 of the 6 ways of recounting the ballots in Florida, he won the actual election too. Like he won the Electoral College as well. If Al Gore was president and not George W. Bush, there would have never been an Iraq war. Do you know how different the world would look if there was never an Iraq war? Do you have any idea how different this country would be? Do you have any idea? Any idea? Al Gore, and by the way, Al Gore, just like a generic, normal Democrat, not like crazy lefty or anything like that, just not having the Iraq war, it's that meme people show of like, the fucking futuristic perfect city where like, it's like a utopia. That's where we'd be. If the guy who actually won the 2000 election was able to become president. That's crazy. That's one alternate timeline. The other thing is, scrap that alternate timeline. How about an alternate timeline where Bernie won in 2016 and the DNC fuckery wasn't able to hold him down? And it became Trump versus Bernie and Bernie wins the election. Again, fucking utopia. We're talking a totally different world, right? But no. We're dealing with, I actually think this is like the worst possible timeline. The way everything unfolded is the worst possible timeline. But look, it's on us, right? We can whine and cry and bitch and moan all we want, but the fact of the matter is, ain't nobody going to save us but us. So that left-wing Tea Party can't come fast enough, and thankfully, we're working on that. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.